But what I'm looking at is this gap, which is occurring globally between 18 to 30-year-olds. We have a demonstrably low birth rate, and it's on the decline like you can't even imagine, to the point where we're going to be under the replacement threshold. I'm not even talking about the replacement threshold for two people. I'm talking about the replacement threshold for one person. That's where we're heading soon. If you don't have the 18 to 30s, they subsidize the generation before, and they subsidize the 5 generations after or 4 generations after, depending on what area you're living in. But we could easily end up with a 7-generation West soon, 7 living generations. If we don't have this, you're going to end up like Japan, you're going to end up like China, you're going to end up like South Korea, where they can't take care of their elderly and they can't take care of their youth either, because the 18 to 30-year-olds subsidize the entire planet. This is I'm almost done. 1 second. I swear, almost done. This is a catastrophe of magnitude of which you can't even fathom if you see population collapse like this. So I think the most important metric to look at is not your own material happiness. I think that you should be looking at the best material state and the best spiritual state for children to be successful in the world. That's the crux of my argument.
All right, let me throw this out here real quickly just before we start, because I don't think a lot of conservatives really understand the fertility slump here. And maybe this speaks a little bit more to your point about no fault divorce, and maybe backs up my my claim about hormonal birth control. And I'm not saying that maybe it's a combination of the two, okay? Because I'm not saying it's one of the, it has to be one or the other.
Sure.
But this is the fertility slump that you're referring to right here. And look where it starts, right around 1965, when hormonal birth control was introduced in the United States.
It actually starts in the year 1800.
Well, okay.
And it goes like this.
Yeah. So we see this decline, we see this with this boost, and now from the last, let's just say 60 some odd years, now we've got this, we've been below replacement level since what, 1972, 1973, the time to be having this conversation and being worried about. I mean, I know that's kind of neither here nor there at this point, but the fertility rate has been below replacement level for quite some time right now. And again, at the time when, if you look at that precipitous drop right there, that's right after hormonal birth control and, of course, no fault divorce. Yep. Which, if I'm going to make a play here, I'm going to say that no fault divorce is a fallout. It is a downstream effect of hormonal birth control. So go ahead, Mike. What were you going to say?
Oh, yeah. So just to add a little bit of context, because what Andrew said is true. The thing is, prior to the year 1850, over half the Earth's population died before the age of 5. So having a high birth rate was a function of survival. Birth rate does not equal survival rate. And the second part was up until 1929 or the Dust Bowl, actually, or just say go up to the 1950s, you needed large families in order to survive. So not all those people were surviving. So those numbers don't quite, especially once you have the advent of broad spectrum antibiotics in 1937, you need fewer children to maintain your children, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Whereas the gentleman from Ontario now has the floor.
Yeah. The problem with stats, and the whole thing here, we can do the stats back and forth. It's like I was saying earlier, statistically, every human being on Earth has one testicle, right? So assuming they're done correctly.
I did the math. That is correct.
Yeah. Assuming they're done correctly, which they usually aren't. Assuming they're looking at the right variables, which they probably aren't. And assuming they give you something you can do about it, which they absolutely cannot. It's just an aggregate number, right? There's a meaning behind it. And you guys can argue whatever. The only thing I know is right now, today, I can not trust any egghead, any authority that says anything, because they're always wrong. All you can trust is what you can see with your eyes. So yeah, children being happy, children being raised well, that could probably work. What do you have to do about it? You have to, enforce boundaries, make your group as happy as possible, because happy parents don't f up their kids. Mm-hmm. So it's like first principles. You got to stick back to what you can see here. And there's too many variables to even account for all this stuff. So as far as the immigration birth rate argument, that argument was settled in the 1980s. Right now, our plan is unrestricted immigration to hopefully beat out China, India, and Africa on an attrition scale. So,
yeah, but to your point there on with immigration.
Sorry. This is one I actually wanted to ask you at the end, Andrew. Mm-hmm. We remove no fault divorce tomorrow, if we add it, at fault divorce. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think those people are going to be any better off when they're forced by the state to stay together? Knowing that after 2020, most people realize state enforcing their will on you is not necessarily a good thing.
I'm gonna be way better off.
So that was well.
I lost a tremendous amount of lucrative aspect to my practice when New York
Well,
went no
yeah,
fault.
and that's my point,
Because
because
we
it
used to
didn't stop gun
used to
violence.
do fault trials, and fault trials burned the first $10,000 to $20,000 of the couple's money. So what we would do is we'd put one on the stand and we would say, you know, what happened in the marriage? Oh, he was so mean to me and he made me so upset. Here's the thing, like, look, I think we can go statistics all day long, and I think Andrew and I will both find things that support our respective positions. That's what's great when you're a trial lawyer, is like cigarette companies found, you know, doctors who would testify to the fact that cigarettes were good for you. You pay enough, you can find statistics that back things up. It's a really easy thing to do. I think what we fundamentally should be looking at here is, why are marriages failing at an alarming rate? And to say it's because people can get divorced slightly easier and slightly cheaper, I think that's just ridiculous. And
See,
I
I
don't
would
think you
argue
have
it's
to have a
because people don't know how to
PhD.
socialize together long term.
Well, the
That's
argument
honestly mine.
I think should be, and I thought I heard Andrew say it yesterday, and it was the most compelling thing he said from my perspective, was that we need to figure out how to build communities that support marriage. You know, how can men support men in staying married, staying fidelitous, staying focused? Now, Andrew, from what I understood, was saying that that is in some ways tied to religion, and that religious communities help people understand their gender roles, the responsibilities of them, help them figure out what it is that is expected of them as a husband or as a wife, help them have definition, help them have support, multi-generational support.
So why'd they
Listen,
stop doing that 50 years ago?
I think there's a lot of other reasons why people rebelled against religion, but the question is this too far south north? Do we treat dandruff with decapitation? That's the conversation we should be having. I really just don't think, this is my problem with Matt Walsh. My problem with Matt Walsh was not that Matt Walsh has 6 kids and says being married is phenomenal for him. That's great. And even if he says, hey, young people, young men, be married. Don't run around chasing skirt and having a, instead focus on building yourself and building a family. Listen, these are worthwhile sentiments. And I can't say he's wrong or right. I don't know. But what I can say without question is, no fault divorce is not the reason why people are getting divorced more than they used to. Even if you show a slight uptick after you pass no fault statutes, in large part because they streamlined the process so all the backlog of divorces finally got put through. It's not about that. This is about, why do people hate being married so much these days? Why do people not want to get married these days? This is the question that matters, not no fault divorce. Believe me, get rid of no fault divorce. Divorce lawyers will go back to making more money. We'll be happy to do it. But it is not going to solve the problem you're trying to solve.
I got really quickly here. Declining birth rates is consistent across all countries right now.
Yeah.
Even the ones
Africa, I
that,
think, is the only exception.
even the ones that don't have no fault divorce. So as far as the fertility slump across the board, globally speaking, right now, you can't really make that connection in a worldwide sense, because you're still looking at at countries that don't even consider no fault divorce.
Well,
So-
and Rollo, you know what it
but-
caused by female prosperity. That's the singular
Exactly.
reason that drops the birth rate.
more or less, yeah.
Well,
So the only argument, if you want to raise the
industrialization
birth
is a-
rate, is basically have to make women barefoot and in the kitchen by law. Which
Yeah, so
nobody's going to go for that.
Well,
Go ahead.
industrialization is a big prime cause of birth rate drops across the board, and has been for a long time. As people become more educated, they most certainly do much more in the way of family planning, this type of thing. However, you will find that the birth rates themselves, are far better with people who are more religious. So the more religious a person reports being, the more children they're likely to have, meaning that people who don't agree with the religious seem to be thinking themselves right out of existence. And kind of back to our lawyer friends, kind of argument here, I think that this is ground zero, as it were. So I do think that foundationally we should have that conversation about no fault divorce, but we should also have a foundational talk past that into community building, like you're talking about, how the religious would come into that. I want to have the conversation for all those things, but I do need you to note this one important thing. If you had a modern battle, like two squads fighting with each other, and it was 20% of them died, that would be considered a bloodbath, a bloodbath of spectacular proportions. You're talking about an increase in some of these places of 30%, 35%, and you're like, it's a slight uptick. That seems kind of disingenuous, dude. Just to be honest with you, it seems kind of disingenuous.
Yeah, I don't know where you're getting those numbers from, but again, it seems to be your favorite way of addressing things is to sort of throw out numbers with absolutely no actual specific reference. But I hear you. I guess what I would say that again,
do you want to see it?
Okay, that's nice. I have a pony in front of me. It's just out of camera. Like I'd love to see it.
I can't.
And again, but here's the thing. I think fundamentally, for example, what you just said about how educated people are less likely to reproduce. Is that essentially one of the statistics you were just citing?
That's correct.
Well, educated people are less likely to divorce. So what do we do with that? How do we tie those two statistics together? Should we use that to suggest the possibility that like what you're doing is you're just taking statistical concepts and numbers and trying to put them together in ways that just respectfully, they don't fit and they don't match the preposition you're trying to create. You're trying to suggest that the instance of people having an entered judgment of divorce means that there are unhappier families as a function of no-fault divorce. This just means that people have finalized a divorce. Do you know how many people are living separate and apart under a written stipulation of settlement as if they were divorced? We used to jokingly call it an Irish divorce. You go out for milk and you never come home. That is what people would do when we were fault-based, because there were so many barriers. It wasn't that they went,
they did it way less. They did it way less.
Andrew,
is the point.
Respectfully, I didn't interrupt you once when you've been speaking.
I have to, or I can't get a word in, dude. Just to be fair. Like, I'm trying to be fair with you.
Listen, Andrew, being fair would be to be quiet
Sorry,
while the grown-ups are talking, and then I'm
So,
quiet
to be
when you're
fair,
talking.
is you filibuster.
And I didn't say,
That's the fair thing?
Thanks,
I
Glenn.
didn't say a word while you were talking, man.
Right.
And Glenn's got
That's because
Glenn's
I
got
talk in
the-
these little segments and you talk in these big segments.
Well,
so.
that's because you're talking in little segments that don't make any sense. You throw grenades of stupidity out and
Glenn
then
is watching
go,
the
when I
Cowboys.
start speaking, you just jump in and interrupt every time I'm trying to make a point. So for someone who seems to value debate so much, you don't seem to follow the rules of it very closely.
Hey, hold on, real quick. Glenn, you had something to say. Go ahead. Finally.
Yeah, so my question to Andrew is like, look, I get what you're saying, but the answer right now is not the church or the way the church does marriage, because Christians have a 25% divorce rate as well. So they're not doing significantly better than anybody else. They may be having more kids, but they're still just as bad in divorce or maintaining a marriage as everybody else is. So that can't be that's not the solution for this right now.
So
what
let
is
me
the
address.
solution?
So let me address that, because it's actually not true. So inside of the United States, when people are asked what type of religion they follow, right, as a form of average, they almost always will respond that they're Christians as a self-identifier. But if you dig into the data a little bit more, especially from Pew Research has been great about this. They identify people by how often they go to church, how much they participate in the religious activities versus people who just self-ID and don't. And you will find that the people who actually participate in the religion and don't just self-ID as being that religion, the metrics are far better. Less rates of divorce, less rates of addiction problems for children. The children do better, the parents do better. They actually make more money. Almost every single metric they do better in. So it's kind of.
So what
not-
actions do
not
they
the
take
fake-
that are so different than the heathens?
Well, that's what I'm saying. What I'm
Commu-
getting
so-
to,
so what they
it's
look
like you're
at-
saying they're not real Christians.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a self-ID. It's no different than when a man says he's a woman. It's just a self-ID. There's no truth to it.
Yeah, look, I think Andrew, when we disagree loudly, but when we agree, I think we agree, and he's absolutely correct. I mean, people who identify as Christian, they're essentially saying, yeah, I'm Christian like I'm Caucasian, like I'm German by ethnicity, but am I German from Germany? Do I have any German, do I do any rituals or anything in my family that has anything to do with that? So yeah, there are plenty of people that identify as Christian, but what the statistics reflect and what reality, again, common sense, let's get away just from statistics, because it's easy to lie with statistics. It's not hard to you don't need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Christians, practicing Christians who belong to a church, belong to a faith community where there's
Yes.
a group of people who are dealing with similar struggles in life. They have the support of other people in that community. The children are raised together with similar values. Yeah, of course, those people are going to have a stronger bond with each other, with their community. When they have problems, they're going to be more likely to have a support system to talk to. Like, this is not rocket science, but it doesn't get back to the fundamental problem, which again, most people aren't in that situation.
Rollo, can I ask James a question here when he's done?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You're in.
So here's my question to you. How come everybody is absolving responsibility from the husband and the wife? You notice this? It's always the community. It's always the law. It's the culture. It's everything else. Why has there not been any discussion at all in this thing about what does a man do that makes divorce more likely?
Because
or makes
only
people
the
happier?
religious
And
can-
what does the woman do?
I'll tell you
that
why.
Makes it more likely.
It's because only the religious can make ought prescriptions that make sense. That's why. So
No, I'm talking practical. I'm like, does he do
I
the
am
dishes?
talking
Does
in a
she-
practical sense, right?
Yeah,
So
does she lose weight? That's the stuff.
Secular morality has no argument to enforce the morals of any sexuality whatsoever, let alone marriage or any union thereof. Secular morality can't do it. So if you're asking these questions like, why is it that these people are absolved of responsibility? It's because society has no choice but to absolve them because there's no foundational ethics that require them to stay together. Only the religion can bring that. Nothing else can.